It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Welcome everyone to the special primary 2022 Sam Lesante Show. May 17th, my friends, please vote. Today's show, we have a distinguished panel, no stranger to any of us here in Northeastern Pennsylvania, and we're going to discuss what's happening in the state, who's running, and the importance of this election. Let me welcome the panel. We're going to start with Rick Morelli. Remember Rick, he is the past chairman of the Luzerne County Council. We have Charles McElwee, who is the editor of Real Clear Pennsylvania. We have Kent Jackson, our media partner, editor reporter from the Standard Speaker. We have Mike DeCosmo, my buddy, who was a former Democratic Luzerne County chairman, probably one of the best they ever had in Luzerne County. And of course, our own Lisa Shigert, who is our news director here at SSPTV. Welcome, everyone. And let me just say this, it's going to be an exciting year, particularly with this primary. Let's start with the state legislators and who's running in the districts, etc. I'd like to get input from starting with you, Rick.
Well, again, I think the first thing that we have to talk about with this is the changing of the districts. Everyone's confused between the 117th and the 116th. Also, which is changing in the 116th. We've never had Luzerne County and Schuylkill County come together. People are just really taken back by this. With that said, there are a lot of candidates, mostly Republican, not many Democrats running for both of these. And not to take up a lot of time, I think there's just some candidates that are being endorsed by Lou Barletta that are leading the charge. You have Mike Bell in the 117th and Dane Watrow in the 116th. Not to say that they're going to win, but those are the two that stand out when it comes to the local area and that have been endorsed by someone like Lou Barletta. Other than that, again, I think it's going to be an interesting race. It's really named notoriety, someone who gets out there and hustles, but a big change. Tara Toohill not around anymore, taking the judgeship. You have Robert Schnee, who's now taken on her as the interim state rep. So bottom line, with that said, a lot of changes, a little confusing for a lot of people.
Let me just mention my friends who are in the candidates. In the 116th district, we have Dane Watrow, we have John Chura, we have Nico Makudo, we have Gary Perna, we have Mike LaRocca, we have Dylan Angelo Orgurkis, and that's it. Did I miss anyone on the 16th? Excuse me?
You say Dane Watrow?
Yeah, Dane Watrow, okay.
I'm sorry.
117th, okay. We have Mike Cabell, we have Clint Lanning, Eugene Ziemba, Michael Stash, Andrew Gagaris, who are on the 117th. Okay, Charles, your input.
Both districts are dealing with quality of life concerns, and voters are looking to Harrisburg for some fixes to those concerns, whether it's out of control warehousing growth. That's a major trend across Pennsylvania. The Lehigh Valley is a good illustration of where this is headed, where you have legislators in that area and local elected officials who are calling for sensible reforms to archaic zoning laws at the state level to ensure sensible growth. It's not to suggest that there should not be warehousing growth, it's to ensure that the growth isn't out of control. There are other quality of life concerns too, Sam, like dirt bikes and ATVs, a major concern, whether it's in Philadelphia, Allentown, or in Hazleton. They're a disruptive force. And again, in the Lehigh Valley recently, 14 legislators had a public hearing where they discussed this concern and the need in Harrisburg for legislation to perhaps increase penalties for illegal dirt bikes and ATVs riding on, or illegally riding on city or state streets.
Kent, your comments on the legislative area.
I think what Rick said is it's a race where people can go out and knock on doors. It isn't a race where a lot of money is being spent in either the 116th or the 117th. It hasn't been a race where big donations have called the shots. It is who knows whom and who gets a message to people at different events around the community right now.
The changes in the district, you think that's going to be confusing for some of the voters?
I don't think it'll be confusing. You might walk into the ballot if you haven't done any work ahead of time and see 5 candidates you don't know, but if you go to your regular polling place, you're in the right place. You might just find out that your state representative carries a different area than he or she used to.
Michael, you've seen a lot of changes in the last number of years, haven't you?
Certainly.
You know, as a Democrat chairman, and I meant what I said. You were probably the best that I've ever seen as chairman. Give me your input as.
Interesting race. Only one Democrat running, Justina Rodriguez, so uncontested there. A couple thoughts. Number one, if you look at the way this district's been redrawn, it's almost a Hazleton area school district plus Schuylkill County. I mean, that's what it's come to. And interestingly, we have 3 candidates from Schuylkill County running, 3 from Luzerne County. So it's almost evenly divided there. So I think depending on who works the new areas the hardest, and with the name recognition in the Hazleton Area School District and the tie-ins there, like some of these people I've seen in a lot of past rallies, some of the people I've never seen before. So I think some of the people are already known. But also, Sam, I just want to say, and we're going to get, if we're lucky, about a 22 to 24% turnout. You know, I think ballot position is important here too. With 6 candidates, I think, I mean, historically speaking, you know, if you're 1 or 6, it's probably a good position to be. You know, but if you're crunched up in the middle, I mean, people are going to have to look for that name a little bit, especially if you're an unknown. So I think that's a consideration also. But as Ken said, I mean, the door-to-door stuff, I don't think, from what I've heard, I know 3 candidates are going real hard door-to-door, door knockers everywhere. So I think there's a lot of grassroots. And, you know, the fact of the matter is, the last poll I saw for state Republicans, I guess there are 40% of the voters still undecided.
Wow.
So, I mean, if that holds true, you know, I think even in the state representative race, that's going to play a big role.
Mm-hmm. Lisa.
Well, the fact that there are 3, as you said, running from each of these counties, 3 from Schuylkill and 3 from Luzerne, that splits up the vote. So that will be interesting to see who got the word out the best. And we're so spoiled because we had Toohill for all these times and everybody was familiar with her. So now there's a lot of names that people are not familiar with. And as Ken said too, you have to do your homework before you go to the polls because there may be some names you've never seen before, some new people running. So I think it is very important that they should watch the Sam Lesante Show. No, an intended plug there.
A lot of candidates on.
Yes, a lot of them are on to see where they stand and what their views are on all of these things. That's the most important thing, I think, is that you need to know before you head to the polls who you are voting for. And this will be very interesting because it is split and the Valley now being separated from the remainder of the Hazleton area for this 116th district.
Looking at that, and let's stay with the people who are running, okay, and the qualifications. I think all of us here, I've always stressed qualifications, know who the candidates are, so you're making at least a decent vote. We've seen when we put people in by popularity, it doesn't work. Give me a rough review, what you think about who the candidates are running in the 116th and 117th, then we'll move on to the congressional.
Well, again, there are a lot of candidates. I mean, again, let's stay with the 116th. You have Dane Watrow, you have Gary Perna from Clares, you have Nico Makuta, who's another Clares guy over there. You have Chura, who's a West Hazleton guy. You have O'Gurkis, who's a Hazel Township person. Everyone knows her mother and her father. You know, good quality people. I mean, listen. They're all good people. I mean, when you go to the issues, they're probably, and most of them are Republicans, and I think it's going to be a Republican wave. But the fact is that, you know, it is a little bit of a popularity contest. It comes down to who you know, because there's nothing you could say bad about them. When it comes to the 117th, you have Mike Abell. Now, the difference there in that district is Mike is from here, Lower Luzerne County. Okay, it's mostly Sugarloaf, Butler, Cunningham. That then goes up to Dallas and Harvey's Lake. That's a big difference. People are going to vote up there for those 2 candidates, and then down here they're going to vote for Mike. Whoever takes that middle part is going to win. So that's how elections are. I mean, it definitely comes down to credentials and what they come for, but in this election here, it's going to come down to who you know and where they're from.
Your comments on that, Charles?
Lots of candidates, but in many ways this primary can be considered the general election because the reality is this is now a reliably Republican area, which if one were to be told that 20 years ago, it would be a surprise. This was a blue region. This was the heart of the working class Democrat. But those voters have shifted. They're changing their party registration. They may have started voting Republican in recent cycles, but now they're changing their registration too. And that's reflective of Luzerne County voter registration numbers, where if the pace continues, we could see the day, but even by the 2024 presidential election, where Luzerne follows the path of Westmoreland in western Pennsylvania, and it's actually a Republican-leaning county. So regardless of candidate, the May 17th primary can be considered locally, similar to what we see in Philadelphia, where the primaries are considered a general, that whoever prevails will more likely not win in November.
Kent, your reaction to the candidates?
Because of what Charles was discussing, there's a movement to open the Pennsylvania primaries to allow independents to vote in either the Democrat or Republican Party. They'd have to choose one. But this year, if you live in the 117th, for example, if you're not a Republican, the election's over before you get to vote in November. So that's one of the arguments for it. And in the odd-yeared elections, the municipal elections, where you have races like school board, judge, district attorney that are supposed to be nonpartisan, it kind of makes sense to have some people get a chance to vote on that in the primaries, because sometimes they too are decided before the general election comes around.
Mike?
Sam, I just look, when you have this many candidates running, I try and find the candidate. You've heard me probably use this phrase before, but the candidate who has the best story to tell. What's their background? Like you said, do they have government experience? Have they been successful in business? What are their roots to the community? I mean, a lot of people are politically active, but you may never see them at any event like a Lions Club or a Unico event or a church event. I look for the people who are very active in the community and don't just show up at election time. And I think we have a pretty good broad brush of families here. Yeah.
Lisa?
Well, following up on what Kent said, Pennsylvania is only one of 9 states that has a closed primary. So that means that there are 1.3 million people that don't actually get to vote in the Pennsylvania primary because they're not a registered Democrat or a Republican. So there is an effort, as you said, underway, Ballot PA campaign, that they want to make it an open primary so everybody would have the opportunity. So that would change things drastically too if people had the opportunity to do that. Because if you're not a Republican or Democrat, you feel slighted not being able to participate.
Folks, you're watching a special primary 2022 show, a Sam Lesante show. We're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the special primary 2022 show, the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Talking about this election, I have on my cell phone gubernatorial candidate Lou Barletta. Lou, thanks for taking the time and spending some time with us with our panel.
Oh, happy to talk to you.
I'm going to start with Rick Morelli. We have some various questions we're going to ask you. Rick?
Lou, real quick, again, I'd like to get your opinion on how the campaign's going. But one thing that I noticed too, with all the important things going on in this world right now, one is immigration, and the other is talk about independence of our energy. These are two things you hit on years ago, and I find it funny that people are now talking about them today. What are your thoughts on that?
I think everybody in the country knows how I feel about illegal immigration. From my time back as mayor of Hazleton, and just look what's happening at the border. That's a very important issue to people as I'm traveling around Pennsylvania, especially as we watch these ghost flights coming in, dumping people in our communities. We don't know where they are, who they are, where they're going. That comes to an end when I'm governor. I'm going to stand up for the working people in Pennsylvania, and I don't think that's any secret. Energy is another issue that I think is at the top of our priority list. With all the natural gas, we have more natural gas under our feet here in Pennsylvania than anywhere in the world. We're going to build the pipelines. We're going to get this energy to market. We're going to start exporting LNG, and that will bring jobs here to Pennsylvania. Right now, I will withdraw us from RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative that Governor Tom Wolf is putting us in. And basically what that will do will end our natural gas jobs, our jobs in energy here in Pennsylvania, and Josh Shapiro will do the same. So it'll be a big issue between myself and Josh Shapiro in the general election.
Charlie McAway.
Public safety is a top concern in Pennsylvania cities, especially in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. You have spent a lot of time in Philadelphia, especially in South Philly. In your conversations with voters there, how mobilizing of a force is that concern, crime and public safety? And how do you figure that will loom in the election against Shapiro, who is, of course, the chief law enforcement officer as state attorney general?
I've spent a lot of time, especially in Kensington, in Philadelphia. It's the largest open-air drug market east of the Mississippi. And it's hard to believe that it's actually here in Pennsylvania, literally needles covering the ground. Drug dealers are making over $50,000 a week. People injecting each other in their neck while the police have to sit in their cars and aren't allowed to do anything because of Larry Krasner, the DA, because of Josh Shapiro, the Attorney General, who's doing nothing, Mayor Kinney, and Governor Tom Wolf. That's the number one issue for people in Philadelphia. Is I go down. I remember my last trip down, Charlie. I was talking to this owner of this restaurant, and he started crying, and he said his 16-year-old son was shot dead right in front of his house. He had to sell his house to move because he couldn't walk in the front door anymore without picturing that. They've done nothing. Josh Shapiro would rather go after the little sisters of the poor than going after the drug dealers in Philadelphia. I'm going to be a governor who's going to stand behind our law enforcement. We're going to give them the funds they need, the respect they deserve. And if I got to bring the National Guard to Philadelphia at times when we watched what was happening there, then I'm going to bring every resource I can to stop crime. You know, it all comes from the top. It all comes from the message of the governor, and it's going to be clear where it stands with me.
Hi, Congressman. The world's always changing. How do we educate our children to keep up with the changes? What do you propose for the state's educational system?
Well, Ken, good to talk to you, and I'll tell you, I'm really excited about this. You know, we're releasing my education plan, and I think we need to go in a different direction when it comes to education, especially in our public schools. So I've put together an advisory board, and you know, while I was in Congress, I had toured a school in Columbia County. It was Central Columbia. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it is like those schools that I've seen before. It's not a VOTEC. It's a regular high school, but the school has been retrofitted to change so that they could change the curriculum. When you go into that school, there's 5 career paths you can choose from, and then you begin. The curriculum is molded around your choices. For example, journalism. The students are doing the commercials in that area. Those that are in healthcare are wrapping ankles on the sports teams. The one father was telling me there are animals in the school. The one father was telling me that his daughter was studying to be a veterinarian until the day came when she had to castrate a bull, and then she didn't want to be a veterinarian anymore. He said, "You know how much money that saved me to find that out in high school rather than in college." Yeah. So it's you know, we're getting kids thinking, you know, in 9th and 10th grade about a career path, which is, I think, exactly what we need to do.
Mike DeCosmo. Mike?
Lou, 2-part question. I'm going to ask you to break the 11th commandment about 2 of your fellow Republicans. The first one, I could tell you, Democrats are foaming at the mouth, hoping Doug Mastriano will be the candidate in the general election. How do you stop Doug Mastriano? And the second thing I just want to ask, Lou, for someone who's been as loyal to Donald Trump as you, is there any possibility he comes out and endorses you before the election? Because you're the one who deserves the endorsement, and the election will be over. Let's be honest.
Yeah, well, I'll answer the first one, first part of that question, Mike. And you know, right now, you know, it's coming down to myself and Doug Mastriano. It's been a 2-person race from the day that I announced last May. It hasn't changed. I've been at the top of the polls, or at least second in every single credible poll that has come out. Doug has a following. Mastriano has a following. So I don't think he's going to lose much of his support, even with the negative ads that my the other candidates are running against him. I think his total is going to stay around 20%, 21, 22%. We've been just about there. The hard thing for me, Mike, is with all these other candidates who have remained in the race, it makes it a little more difficult for me. So we do know there's a large number of undecideds yet. In the one poll, those undecideds said that they were leaning toward me 2-1 over Mastriano. So, I think for the last 2 weeks, this race is going to depend on winning over those undecideds. The second part of that question is, I would love Donald Trump's endorsement. I was, as you know, one of the first in Congress to endorse him, co-chaired his campaign in 2016. I think that endorsement means a lot. And, it means a lot. I mean, just look what it did in Ohio. One thing I've learned is never speak for Donald Trump. I would love for him to come out next week, this week he's coming to Pennsylvania. But he has a couple other friends in the race as well. Mastriano has done a lot in the election integrity stuff, and right now Corman's helping there as well. So I would love to have that endorsement. Would be disappointed, obviously, if I didn't get it. But we'll wait and see.
Lisa Sugart.
Lou, with all those undecided voters, how important is it that you are the first name on the ballot?
Well, Lisa, that does matter. I don't know, what percentage, but I think what makes it even more significant is with all the ads that Dr. Oz and McCormick are doing in the Senate race. It is very difficult for the gubernatorial candidates to cut through the noise. Very difficult for them to get a message through. And I think the proof of that is they have spent millions of dollars now for months running ads when I wasn't even running one ad yet. And I still stayed on top of the polls. So I think it's hard for them to get their message through. And with so many names, when people go in, seeing a familiar name, I have the highest name ID of all the candidates there. Seeing somebody a name you recognize, someone a little bit about their record, I think is going to be a big advantage for me.
Lou, thanks for taking the time and giving us a call. We wish you the best of luck. And my friends, I did a special half-hour show with Lou Barletta that we're going to begin airing starting May the 10th. You are going to be shocked when you hear what Lou has to say about one of the public schools that we have. Was it a public school that we were talking about, Lou?
Yes, it was, Sam. It was a public school, and there are a number of them. That's not the only one. We're finding them in the Poconos, Cumberland County, and down in Chester as well.
My friends, especially you parents, you are going to be totally shocked when you find out what Lou has discovered that's happening in some of these schools. We'll take a break. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante special primary 2022 show, my friends. We have a distinguished panel here today talking about what's happening. Please vote May 17th. It is a critical election. You all know that. We've talked about the 116th district and 117th district. Let me just repeat the names again so we don't miss anybody. Mike LaRocca, this is 116th district. John Chura, Dane Watro, Gary Perna, Angelo Agorkas, and Nico Makuda. On the 117th, Mike Cabell, Eugene Ziemba, Clint Lanning, Anthony Gagaris, and Mike Stash. The panel, no stranger to anyone in this panel, no stranger to anyone in our viewing area. We start with Rick Morelli. We have Charles McAwee, Ken Jackson from the Standard Speaker, a media partner, Mike DeCosmo, and our own news director, Lisa Sugar. Congressional candidates, Bognet and Marcicano, quick reply.
Yeah, so to me, interesting election. You have Bognet, who's running again, who ran a very close race against Cartwright, who, let me say that although I think this is going to be a Republican wave, this Cartwright will be a very tough Democrat to beat. But when it comes to the primary with Bognet versus Marcicano, I think it'll be an interesting race. I mean, Mike Marcicano, he's a tough candidate. If you know him, you know that if he goes to Congress, he's going to fight. I mean, he's putting out some very tough ads. I think they're moving himself up in the polls. You have Bognet, who raises a lot of money, who's a conservative, really running on that. You know, it's going to be an interesting race. Two Hazleton area guys running for the seat. It's going to be tough. And again, even whoever wins, it's going to be tough to beat Cartwright. But if there's a time to win this seat, it will be now. And so I think it's going to come down to the wire. It's going to get very tight between those two guys. But again, let me remind too, Bognet has always been a Republican. Marcicano was a Democrat for years now, has moved over, but he's addressed that in a lot of his campaign, in his commercials.
Yeah, so Marcicano is part of that trend we're seeing. Former Democrats, even those who were elected Democrat in the area, who are now Republican. Jim Montone is another example in Hazel Township. Marcicano, yes, running against Bognet. Marcicano he operated almost as like a Frank Rizzo-esque figure when he was mayor of Hazleton in the 90s. Bognet ran a very competitive race in the last cycle. He'll be competitive again. And the reality of the district, though, is that you have Scranton. And in Scranton, to be a member of the Democratic Party, it's almost like local economic development. You almost have to be a Democrat in Scranton. If you want to be an attorney, be involved in the civic life, being a Democrat in Scranton is akin to being a Democrat in Philadelphia. So that's the problem with the district for a Republican candidate. The rest of the district may be red, Lackawanna County may be trending red, but the city of Scranton, it's remaining blue, and that creates a challenge for any Republican candidate in an otherwise competitive cycle, one where we'll see a red wave.
Ken, your reaction.
You have two people that are well known here and have interesting backgrounds. Mike Marcicano, state police helicopter pilot, commercial airline pilot, mayor of Hazleton. Now he runs an excavating company. Jim Bognet, UCLA graduated lawyer, political consultant, has run campaigns all over the country, worked for Trump in the international monetary banking part of his administration, and now is running his own campaign, so going from the man behind the scenes to the man at the front of the campaign. The fact, though, that the two of them are coming together weakens them, I think, and deletes their funds for the run against Cartwright, because for either of them to take on Cartwright is a tall hill to climb, and it gets taller when you have to spend some of the money just to get through the primary. It'll be a battle.
Mike, your reaction.
Yes, Sam. Locally, I don't think there's too many people who don't know the Marcicano families or the Bognet families. And I think what you're going to see because of that, there's going to be a pretty even vote down here in the 1st District. Just alluding to Kent's point, I know for a fact, as of today, we're taping this on May 4th, Mike Marcicano has spent $600,000 of his own money. I mean, this is well documented in finance reports. And he hasn't been taking any contributions to the best of my knowledge. So Mike's certainly in it to win, and from what I understand, as a result of his advertising, he's moved up in the polls. I think it's still Bognet's possibly to lose because he ran last time against Cartwright. He's certainly the favorite, but I think this election is going to be decided in the upper end of the county. I get a good feel for the Hazleton area for the 1st District, but I'll tell you the truth, I have no idea what's happening up there.
Lisa?
Well, they've both shown their allegiance to former President Trump. However, Trump has endorsed Bognet. So what will that mean, since he did get the official endorsement from President Trump? I know Mike's ads are all talking about Trump as well. So when you watch the ads, you see a strong allegiance to former President Trump as well. So we'll see if, like in Ohio, if Trump's endorsement means that he will push Bognet over the top.
In that same vein, you talked about money, you were talking about the U.S. Senate race, the Pennsylvania U.S. Senate race, where they're literally, as Lou said, they're spending millions of dollars, okay? Your reaction to the amount of money being spent and what you think, Charlie, on the U.S. Senate race?
Yeah, so this is a record holder. I mean, the most expensive Senate race in history. Up until this point, it was actually the 2016 race between Katie McGinty and Pat Toomey that was the most expensive U.S. Senate race in history. And that's just a tribute to how coveted this seat is. On the Republican side, of course, that is getting all the attention. Dr. Oz against Dave McCormick. Oz got Trump's endorsement. We'll see the power of that endorsement. McCormick has run a very effective on-the-ground campaign. He is campaigning his head off. He's hitting all the counties. There seems to be grassroots momentum in that sense. The question will be, will we see Dr. Oz pull it through? One, because of Trump's endorsements, similar to what we may have seen with Vance in Ohio, although Ohio is a far different state than Pennsylvania. I think there's a misperception there, Sam. We have more in common with New Jersey than Ohio. But the second component to Oz, though, is are we seeing the pattern that we witnessed unfold in the, let's say, 16 primary, where you had so many voters who behind closed doors were saying they're going for Trump. And that was reflected in the results. People behind closed doors, even in suburbia, Republican voters who are embarrassed to admit they're going for the TV guy, Dr. Oz. And Oz will squeeze through as a result of that silent Oz vote.
Kent?
People are spending $9 and $10 million to win a seat that pays about $180,000 a year, and that doesn't compute to my daily budget kind of thinking. And I like the idea that one person has one vote, but here you do see that money carries more weight than the individual person can muster.
You think there should be a limit set?
I'm for reforming it in some way, but I don't have the answers.
Yeah.
I think that, having public financing has been tried, and there were things that kept it from catching on, mostly because at the national level, the candidates can raise more than they would get through, a national fund that would contribute equally to them. I think maybe shorter campaigns, if you, like the British do, they do their elections in a month or something, there might be some merit in that.
Mr. DeCosmo.
Yes, Sam, prohibitive spending. How do you get around that? How do you get by that? Well, as a Democrat, I should say, boy, I'm happy the Republicans are spending all this money in the primary, but you're talking 2 billionaires probably, not even millionaires. They're not running out of money. The winner is still going to have plenty of money to run against John Fetterman or Connor Lamb. So, money, it's not like when we were just talking about the Marcy Cano and Bognett race. These guys don't have those kind of resources. But one quick story I have to tell, I don't know either man personally, but our city council president, Jim Perry, a school teacher in the Bloomsburg School District, had Dave McCormick as a student. And if you wanted to hear someone talk glowingly about a candidate, talk to Jim Perry about him. He has a very personal relationship with him, but great family. His father used to be the president of the Bloomsburg University. He was the first chancellor in our state system, did a magnificent job. And one other political anecdote, Sam, how Dave McCormick's father got his job at Bloomsburg was through our former friend Frank Fay, who was chairman of the board.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, because Dave McCormick's grandfather was the Democratic County Chairman for Lackawanna County.
Wow.
Yes, but Frank Fay was the guy that got him his father a position.
Still around, Frank.
Yeah.
His ghost is around. Okay, Lisa.
All politics are local, right? Well, after hearing about the Ohio race, they said the real winners, one of the reports said, were the people that no longer had to watch the ads. So you wonder, they spend all this money on the ads, but how much are the people tuning out? Like, you see all this noise and you're like fed up with it. I think if anything, maybe it does force people to, learn more about the candidates so that they can make their own judgments themselves. But the money that is being spent is unbelievable, and we'll see whether or not it pays off.
It pays off. My friends, you're watching a special primary 2022 show with our distinguished panel. We'll take a break. We'll be back right after these. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, a special primary 2022 show. My friends, May 17th, please vote. I have a distinguished panel here today to discuss some of the issues. We have Rick Morelli, we have Charles McElwee, we have Ken Jackson from the Standard Speaker, our media partner, Mike DeCosmo, and our news director, Lisa Sugart. I'm going to ask each one of you what you personally think is the most important thing. Now, I know there's a lot of issues important, but what you think is the most important issue or concern in this primary election. I'll start with you, Rick.
So to me, Sam, it's really about moving the needle more to conservative. I've never been against Democrats, but what concerns me now and myself and the future for my son is more the left-wing liberals. I'm looking for people to win who will move our government back to the middle, get away from the woke community. I'm concerned, like everybody else is, in the sense of how crazy things have gone in our country of moving so far left. We need to move it back to the middle. So I want people with common sense, who have moral values, who have a really good plan for the future for our families, for our kids. So it's not about one issue, it's more about the overall philosophy of the people who are elected, moving those people into our government and the direction of our country.
Charles.
If we're talking the local level, I think it's a profound sense of economic discontent. And that certainly felt among voters in this area, especially senior citizens who are living throughout the area, who are living on fixed incomes, who are enduring this present period, whether it's inflation, high gas prices, or just the fact that they may be living in neighborhoods where there are quality of life concerns like blight, or just the warehousing growth that we're seeing throughout the area. The Democrats, so their frustrations are translated through their anger directed at the Democratic Party. And really, when Trump was elected in 2016, at that time, I mean, it was only 4 years after Luzerne had gone for Obama. So these weren't voters who liked George W. Bush. They were angry over the Bush years and the Republican Party of that era, let's say this 2006 cycle. Since then, though, I think we're seeing the shift where at that time in 2016, it was a vote for Trump, not necessarily for the GOP, but due to the leftward direction of the Democratic Party and the fact that the party no longer represents the concerns of voters in this region, the working class, they are now finding political refuge in the GOP, and that's certainly reflected in voter registration numbers.
Kent?
I think the most important issue to anyone who's listening is his or her vote. You get a chance to make a choice, and there are so many candidates on the ballot that I've been using cheat sheets just to keep track of the names for our taping. So as a tip, you're allowed to bring in papers, articles, and things that help you remember the candidates, but look around, look at the issues, find out who you feel will represent you, and then take your memory devices in if you need them, but go and vote.
As a reporter, do you find it a lot more difficult to try to keep track of all the candidates and make sure your reporting is...
Well, I get paid to, and it's fun for me. But for other people, it's one of a long list of things they have to do in a busy day. And I encourage you to make the effort. I think you'll get a better understanding of who's doing what in your community and why.
Mr. DeCosmo, what do you think?
Sam, I mean, there's so many issues. I agree with Rick, although I'm going to take it one step further. I think we have to moderate from the right as far as the left. I think we need to get back to moderation, Sammy. I think we need to get back, and I believe very firmly in local elections, people vote their pocketbook. And what I've seen happen in this country the last 2 to 3 years was, and of course we went through the deep recession the last 2 years of Trump, people were unemployed, but there were so many giveaway programs out there that I think people got lazy between the unemployment, between the rebates, and just sitting back and waiting. And now we have inflation. And I think we need to get back to where people have to go out there, earn a paycheck, find a good job, and just get back to building the American economy again. And I think that starts at the local level, Sam.
Lisa?
Absolutely. And as a mom and as a wife, and I go out shopping, I see the increasing price of everything, food, the gasoline. I mean, that's a national topic. It's a local topic. It affects each and every one of us. So I want us all to be able to afford to put food on the table and gas in our cars without worrying about if we can do it next week or not. So I think we have to pay attention to what will, who will be in office to help us in that respect to make things more affordable and also keep us safe. I want to be safe. They're the things I look at that I want to know is happening when I vote.
Rick, when you talk about the wackos on the real extreme left and what they're doing, when you see the show that I recorded with Lou Barletta, and what Lou found out at one of his debates, and what's happening in our schools, in some of the schools, you may know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
It was shocking to me, and he read some he could even read on our taping. And so now, when you start talking about these things, I know people get really upset about different things, but we have the blame game, okay? Republicans as well as Democrats have fallen to the blame game. We're going to blame Putin for the gas. We're going to blame this for that. We're going to blame here. We're going to blame. But nobody wants to take the responsibility of why we have gas prices going to the roof. I mentioned about chicken, from $2 a pound to up to $12, $13 a pound. Try to find them in the supermarket to begin with, okay? So we see the country just falling apart, in my opinion. How do you react to that?
Well, I think what you just said was the responsibility now is back in the voters. The voters understand the inflation. You go back to what Mike said, who understands the economy, all this stuff. You know what's going on, and I know what you're talking about in the schools. There's some crazy stuff going on. It comes now down to the voters to decide on the candidates, to ask the good questions, to have interviews like you do on your show, a lot of people don't do, to understand what those candidates are about and how and what they're going to stand for. That's where it comes down to the accountability right now. It comes down to the voters, because the people in office are the ones making those decisions, and the people in the office were put in there by the voters. So it comes down to the voters getting out there, pay attention. It's one thing to complain about, but I guarantee a lot of these people don't know what's going on in the schools. All they do is they read the newspaper, they go to the store, they see the inflation, but do they really understand where it comes from? Like you said, they blame, they go out and complain, but now's the time for them to go do something, and it comes down to voting.
Charlie, when do you start taking responsibility when you're in public life and you see what's happening in our country today, morally, as well as inflation, and it's so sad when you see people on fixed income. I'm sure Mike DeCosmo could write a book on this. Mike, as a tax consultant, and people who are coming in there can't afford to pay their oil bills, they're suffering, they're hurting, okay? You see that all the time. Charlie.
Well, Rick noted, which is important, that the issue of schools alone. I mean, if anything, I think on the Democratic side, if you're a strategist, you're just hoping for amnesia when it comes to voters over the past 3 years and what has happened. We've endured this pandemic era, and we all carry that memory. And during that period, there has been so much flux, whether it is the economic consequences of what initially happened, or just the cultural divisiveness that we see across the nation, even at a hyper-local level, that has just led to intense fatigue among voters. And in the past few cycles, there has been this moratorium that we've seen in down-ballot elections, where it has the excesses of the Democratic Party in terms of the left. How is that translating into voting patterns? And while Biden prevailed in November 2020, even in that election, Republicans performed quite well down ballot. So as Mike noted before, it's really just this yearning for the middle. And in Pennsylvania, that's definitely the path to electoral destiny. And we have certainly not seen that in recent cycles.
Kent, how is it as a reporter, when you see that, you try to be as balanced as you could? I mean, here even when we do our shows, our news, we try to, but then sometimes, well, you're siding with this, or you're doing this. My show is a talk show, and we try to bring information. But as a reporter, you try to bring facts. Is it sometimes a little difficult for you, Kent?
Well, I have the advantage, I guess, and it's a blessing that I get to talk to people directly, because a lot of voters only get to know who's in the race by what they read in the paper, what they saw on TV, what they read on the internet. So I get some direct FaceTime with the people, and that's a luxury not everyone has, so I like that. I mean, I've been here for, 38 years, and my approach to elections has usually been, I get to talk to everybody, read and write a lot of what's going on in what's going to be in the newspaper, and then usually the Monday night before the Tuesday election, I'll say, well, now who do I want to vote for? I like to separate even in my own mind, my own views, so that, I've gotten the information, but I don't want my views to color what you're reading in the paper.
Yeah. Michael, your thoughts on the blame game?
Well, the blame game, Sam, I mean, just tying everything together we've been talking about, and I have to say about Kent. Kent covered me back when I was on city council and school board. The fairest and best reporter, political reporter I've ever been around. I mean,
that's why he does a show with us.
Yeah, I mean, he really has been that good. And he's still covering the school board today. Charlie talked about the warehousing problem we have. Rick and I have private discussions often as two former presidents of the school board, Sammy, but we need people to think, whether it be in Harrisburg, whether it be in Congress, whether it be in a local level, what's going to happen with this explosion to our schools? Where are we going to keep building schools? Where are we going to put these kids? Where are we going to find jobs for the people coming in? I mean, is this a local problem? Is it a state problem? Is it a congressional problem? But it's something that we have to have a discussion about. You just can't keep saying, well, it's great to bring 2,000 new jobs to the area, but does that mean 4,000 new children where we can only house 10,000 children in our schools? What's going to happen? Let's have a discussion about this.
Lisa?
Well, on the subject of education, I think the pandemic woke up a lot of people because the parents were home with their kids. So we've seen in many states where the parents now are getting very actively involved, and it's encouraged people to run for school board and to pay attention to what is going on around them and hopefully on all levels of government. So maybe it was the wake up we needed, that people will start paying attention and holding everybody accountable.
Folks, it's your responsibility. May 17th, as they're saying, you should vote. We'll be back to wrap it up right after these messages. Welcome back to a special primary 2022 show, my friends. Please vote on May 17th. Our distinguished panel here today is Rick Morelli, Charles McAwee, Ken Jackson, Mike DeCosmo, and our news director, Lisa Sugar. What is the most important thing you think? Well, there's a lot of things that are important, but what do you think is impacting our area right now?
So again, with these elections, you got to look at locally and what's going on around us. And I think the one thing in my mind are all these distribution centers popping up. Okay, this is changing our area. And is it a good thing or a bad thing? The fact is that you have people coming in, they're more kids in our schools, taxes are going up, you can't put the kids anywhere. You look at all the trucks coming in, how it impacts the roads. Again, we don't need jobs around here. I mean, everything's been jobs, jobs, jobs. We don't need jobs. So to me, and going back to the state rep race, I think this is the one thing people need to look at. I personally think, and I've had these conversations all the time, we need to change our train of thought in the area. No more jobs, jobs, jobs. We need to find leaders to come, bring things into our area so people could come and who want to come to the greater Hazleton area, not to have to live here. I think that we have to change our whole ideology of that, and I think that comes down to the people who are coming into office and what their thoughts are.
Interesting. Charles?
Rick is right. The present economic development model for the area, that is the top concern. I mean, think of it this way, Sam. If you're a commercial real estate developer in the city of Philadelphia, last year alone, close to 900,000 square feet of vacant office space in the city. The future of those buildings are in question because we now have remote work. So if you're a commercial real estate developer, what are you doing? You're turning to warehousing. So you're looking to micro warehousing in greater Philadelphia. You developed 7822 corridors in the Lehigh Valley. That now has maxed out development. So where's the spot now for that industrial development? It's Hazleton. And we are seeing with our eyes, just driving around the area, all the cleared wooded areas. And we have to be prepared for the profound impact that's going to have on the future of the area. And I don't think we're prepared at all.
Kent?
The part of our area that appeals to a lot of us, and especially to me, it's the chance to leave the office, and on a weekend I can take a hike, I can ride my bike in the woods, I can paddle somewhere in a kayak. And those are things that are valuable too, and we're in a position where we're having growth like I haven't seen in my adult life here in our area, but with growth comes a loss of some of the other things, and if we wanted to make the area a place that people want to live, you know, those things that you do after work are also as important as whether you have a place to work.
Michael?
Yeah, Sam, I agree with everything these three gentlemen just said. One of the things, big changes that I think is very important, I don't know how we handle in this area, but housing costs are at an all-time high. And people looking to sell their homes are getting above asking price just about everyone you speak to. The problem is, once you sell your home, where do you go? Yeah. Because anything else you're looking at is also overpriced, or there's no rental units available. So, you know, for this growth, there has to be, and again, some kind of plan. And just one thing, Sammy, what you said before, the blame game. And I'm telling you, when I was on the school board, we'd say, well, listen, we need more money from Harrisburg. Harrisburg would say, we need more money from Washington. So, you know, how do you solve some of these problems? Well, many times it's money, but where's it going to come from? But the local residents can continue to be taxed at the with the school and county and city taxes.
I agree with you there, my friend. Lisa, what are you thinking most?
Well, lastly, I think we need to maintain the good people that we do have here, because as a mom of three, you want your kids to stay around here. So we do need good paying jobs. I know there's a lot of warehouse jobs, but you want excellent paying jobs to keep the talent here. Otherwise, the talent is moving elsewhere, and then what are we left with?
You know, we're talking about all these issues. I got 3 minutes. We have all these issues, Mike, and the panel, and you're saying that you're looking at 20 to 40% possibly turnout. Is that what you? Yeah.
Oh, the 20-25%.
Yeah. And that's the sad thing. That is the most. It's sad, because right now is what we should be going out there voting right now, which is the most important thing. It should be 60%, 70% out there voting, and then people sit back and they see what's happening and they, oh my God, how come this? Well, they could do something about it. Am I correct in saying that?
And again, Sammy, not to play games with those numbers, but that's 20% of the registered voters, and only half the people are registered. So you're talking 10% of the entire population, of the entire voting populace.
Yeah. How do you get people to vote? Anybody? How do you get people to understand how serious this is?
People usually vote when they're mad and upset. And I do think that the turnout will be a little bit higher, because if you're not mad that you're going to the store and the gas prices and everything else, you're never going to get mad.
I'd be running to the election on May 17th. When people go, it's amazing. You fill up your tank. $75, $80. I mean, Mike can afford that, but the rest of us can't afford that.
Trust me. I mean, I got my tax bill. I mean, trust me. It's not easy.
It's just amazing, okay? I just can't emphasize enough. I mean, we've had candidates that come on my show and were able to explain who they are. And I applaud anybody who's running for office today. Believe me, it's a challenge. It's not. I guess it's a little different when you guys ran, Rick and Mike, right? It's a whole different ball game, you know. But I want to thank you, Rick, for coming on. Charlie, you drove up from your home outside of Philadelphia. Kent, it's always nice to see you again, and I always enjoy watching you on that segment. You know, you make me want to go outdoors and take some breath and go back inside and watch the Sam Lesante Show. Okay. Mike, you know, you've been a busy guy with Hazel Township tax collector, and you're doing stuff. Could you reduce our taxes, you think, Mike?
Hazel Township, we haven't had a tax increase in 24 years. We're
Keep it that way.
Yeah,
Lisa, it's nice seeing you. You're
nice
working
to
home
see you
now.
too.
Yeah, nice to see you. Folks, remember, can't impress enough. Please vote May 17th. It's very important. I hope you learned something today. On this special primary 2022 show, we want to bring you information as much as you can. Make some time to vote. We'll see you next time.